I was living with it in my husband's chest from the day I met him, but we didn't know it until 20 years ago this year. So I feel like we have 20 years of experience with this condition. When I was trying to think about how to explain this and to make it somewhat understandable, I just sort of came up with what sounds like a strange title: How Do Candy Canes and Fish Cause All This Trouble? So here's the candy cane and the fish, and sometimes there's berries too. On the Foundation website, you'll see that drawings like this. And so you begin to see where the candy cane comes in. The aorta, the major artery in our body arising out of our heart. You'll see what we're trying to depict there is the aortic valve, which opens, allowing the blood to flow into the aorta. And you notice that I don't have a drawing of one that's open, that's normal, but a normal appearing aortic valve, when it would open, it would be more of a triangular opening. But you notice that little open one on the right. It does look like a fish mouth, doesn't it? And that's what the doctors call it. That is the fish mouth valve. You notice that the normal aorta has the same size throughout, pretty much, in the drawing. But you notice on the other side, along with the fish mouth valve, you will notice that the aorta is enlarged. That is an aneurysm. Sometimes when it's smaller, it's called dilation or dilatation. And I put a little star. I didn't have a drawing of this either, but there's something called coarctation. I didn't want to leave it out. Coarctation is the opposite almost of an aneurysm. It's a narrowing, and it occurs just beyond the curve as the aorta starts to descend down into the body. Some people have that. Some people have that narrowing. They might also have the aneurysm, and they might have the fish mouth, or some combination. There are people with thoracic aortic disease who just have an aneurysm. So they are the candy cane people without the fish. And so now I want to talk to you for a while about my family. It wasn't until 1990 this high-energy fellow got sick. He got pneumonia, and when they cleared the pneumonia, he was in congestive heart failure. So in the cardiologist's office, I heard for the first time about this little fish. And I heard those words, bicuspid aortic valve, and that my husband had been born with this. I didn't believe it, really. Later, I carefully questioned my mother-in-law, and she told me that when he was born, she was not allowed to see or hold him for the first day because he was a little blue and he had a faint heart murmur. But it sort of had been forgotten all those years because he'd done so well. And he and his sister were hospitalized as children, and then his heart murmur, it became more pronounced. He was not allowed to play sports, which vexed him his entire growing up years. And that's just all we knew until we heard about this bicuspid aortic valve. You'll notice in this picture, I have the fish mouth valve, I have his heart, which was failing because he had severe stenosis of that valve. But there's no candy cane. Nobody told us about the candy cane in 1990. No one told us anything. It wasn't in the picture. However, some years later, I got his medical records from this time. In fact, it was when we found out about an aneurysm. I do have a copy of a record that shows that on the angiogram done on him to evaluate his valve in 1990, there was a drawing by hand of his aorta, and it shows it dilated at that time. We were never told anything about his aorta. The reason for that was because there was a theory that Once the valve was replaced, the aorta would no longer continue to enlarge. And I believe today that that is why we were not told. But no one ever double-checked to see if that belief was true or not. So there with Dr. Racy in the center is my husband and his sister. They're about 1 year apart in age. And you'll see that my husband has 3 stars. That means he's had 3 surgeries. The first was in 1990 in our local hospital, and the last 2 surgeries Dr. Racy has performed. Now, his sister was interested enough in what we learned in 1990 that she had an echo performed, an echocardiogram. And she was given a clean bill of health, told that her valves looked fine, everything is fine about her, and she's not like her brother. And then you'll see that a span from 1990 to 2009, 19 years had passed. This is a condition that reveals itself slowly in some instances. And just prior to her surgery, a couple of years before, we began to realize that this woman is a lot more like her brother than she thought. I really thought my husband was an anomaly in the family, and we thought that for a long time. But she began to be symptomatic. She has a long story in her own right. This picture was taken a year ago last summer, and even though they both look pretty good, neither one of them were in the best shape that day. And that's one thing you have to learn about this condition. These people usually look better than they really are.